everybody. My name is Tony Ann Marcolini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I have executive producer Stephen Cohen back to the podcast with me today. You may recall the last time he was here, we spent pretty much the entire, I think, a podcast session talking about the Billy Joel documentary that was coming out on HBO Max at the time, which has been a monster hit. I defy you to go on social media at any point, anywhere, and not find, someone chatting about it. So I'll start by saying congratulations about the success for the project.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been overwhelming and gratifying and all of those adjectives. You hope you do something that your first hope when you do something like this is that you don't get killed, that you dodge that bullet, and then you hope it's good, accepted, and then you move on. And then, the third choice is that you might have made something that is powerful and a little bit more I don't know the word I'm looking for, a little bit more revered, and that you've made something that is going to last. And it seems like we've ticked that third box, that we've got something that for Billy's fans and for Billy and for his legacy, that that really has made some impact on a lot of people. And I've gotten overwhelmingly positive response. Even the responses are very funny because there's a whole group of Billy Joel haters out there. And, the response to a lot of them is sort of like, well, damn, I guess I have to like this guy. So, it's been kind of, it's been ironically funny in a lot of cases, but I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud of the work that Susan and Jessica and all the editors. I mean, I can't tell you. It's so wonderful to be a part of it.
Well, it was beautifully done, and like I said, to really just applause everywhere. Big success.
Yeah, good.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of your other projects, though. Some of the people you've had an opportunity to work with that, um, gee, I mean, the rest of the world isn't probably just enough with Billy Joel, right, who rises to the height of fame. But you've worked for so many or with so many other amazing artists. Justin Timberlake, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we touched on this the last time. I started in this business at a very unique and sort of important time, which was it was an industry that didn't exist. And what I mean by that is that the touring infrastructure and the production infrastructure and the type of shows that you now see when you go see Beyonce or you go see Taylor or you go see The Weeknd, those things were beyond imagination when I first started out. And if you're in this business long enough and you started early enough, you got to interact with many of these artists at particular points in their career where they were evolving and where they were changing. I was very fortunate. My first gig that I actually did after I did Billy Joel was Paul Simon was doing a solo tour for One Trick Pony, which was the film that he directed. I think he directed it. And Phil Ramone was producing, and Phil Ramone produced all the music. And of course, Phil Ramone was in the studio at the time producing Billy, and got to know all of us and got to know me. And he said, listen, Paul, you need to meet Steve because you're taking this on the road. And Steve does the visual stuff for Billy, and you guys should work together. And it was all because of a personal relationship with Phil and a personal relationship that he had with Paul that was my first foray into set design and lighting design for another artist other than Billy. I did an ELO tour in the middle of early on, but I kind of look at that as a kind of a blip, but and that was an interesting thing too as well. But Paul Simon was the first one where I got to do a similar thing, where I got to meet with the artist, interpret what they wanted, work with my friends and, put a show together and take it on the road. The thing about that tour that was so amazing is any real music fans, the band that backed him up was one of the best jazz funk combos on the planet called Stuff. It was Richard T, Emery Gordy. I think Will Lee was on the bass, but I think Tony Levin was the bass player for the tour. Um, and Steve Gadd on the drums. So you had this opportunity to work with these really incredible jazz musicians that were part of Paul's backup band. And we got on the road and we toured together and we had a ball. Like you got to see these incredibly facile and talented musicians, all backing up, arguably one of the greatest singer-songwriters of the 20th century. So when you get to be in that place at that particular time, I pinch myself. I don't have very many photographs from that period,
Well,
but like I
you-
remember it.
you'd have to, right? And John Mellencamp, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, NSYNC, Elton John.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you want to talk about those, Britney and NSYNC, which led to Justin. So, NSYNC was selling out these theaters, and it was mania, and they wanted to take this into arenas, and I got hired to take them into arenas. So I do, NSYNC. Justin and Brittany are managed by Johnny Wright. Brittany's around seeing the NSYNC work. She gets ready to do a tour. I jump on Britney Spears, and that collaboration, I did, three big, huge Britney Spears tours, HBO specials with her. Then when Justin went solo, it was like, okay, Steve, you come and do the solo stuff. And the interesting thing about those two artists is eventually they change. Eventually they outgrow you, and they move on to other people. And the first time that happens to you, you go, hey, why? Like I did a great job. And then I started to, really accept the fact that all artists grow and they evolve and they need new people to collaborate. Elton grew out of a personal relationship that I had with his manager. We were very close for a long time, and because I was Billy's lighting designer, it was like a no-no. You can't have Billy Joel's lighting designer lighting Elton John because there was this, as much as the rivalry was kind of not real, there was a that camp versus this camp kind of a thing, and
But they tour again together for a
yeah,
little
well,
bit, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
they toured together, and I did the Elton tour, and then both myself and Brian Ruggles, who's Billy's sound engineer, who also knew Elton and John Reed at the time, we flew over to London to pitch him to do the face-to-face tours. There's two stories about that. Dennis Arfa, the booking agent, and Howard Rose had this idea about how that kind of came about is that it became apparent that Billy could sell out stadiums. It was the next evolution, and it was in the late '90s. And Billy never felt comfortable selling out a stadium all by himself. He said, "I sit behind the piano. I'm not, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But if we could do a combination tour with, me and Bruce Springsteen or me and Elton John, that would be, then that would be cool and that would be fun." And we were like, "Well, let's ask Elton." It seems like a great idea. So, and Elton at the time, I think we had made an entreaty to him a few years back and he wasn't interested. And then he was like, yeah, let's do that. And I wrote that show. I wanted to make it a show where it wasn't just an opening act and a closing act. So, I came up with the concept that they both walked out together and the first notes of the first song was an Elton John song sung by Billy Joel. The second
Yeah.
song was a Billy Joel song sung by Elton John. And then the bands played together. And then the initial iteration was that they would do, then, Billy would leave, Elton would stay out on stage, 7 or 8 songs into it. Billy would creep back on stage and they would do another duet and Billy would do a piano solo. And then they would leave. We did no set change. We went seamlessly right into Billy's set. Billy would do 6 or 7 songs. Elton would come back out, and sneak out on stage and do a solo. And then the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes were an encore with both bands that I still consider the best 20 minutes in rock and roll I've ever experienced, where it was Billy's biggest hits, Elton's biggest hits, Billy's biggest hits, Elton's biggest hits, and then a Beatles cover or a Who cover. And, and the whole thing ended with Piano Man, where it was, it was really the very first co-headline production that ever happened. And it was, I mean, it lasted for, I think, 16 years, 17 years off and on. So
I hope somebody's got the video from that.
a lot, not a lot. There's only a couple of shows that were ever shot. And there is some, but it's not broadcast. It was all shot for the big screens and not shot for broadcast purposes. So
I feel like today that wouldn't be true, right? Today you'd absolutely have recorded it.
oh yeah, well today, when you go out on the road, these productions are basically touring television productions anyway, not only for the image magnification and enhancing the size of the images in the stadium so you can see them, but everyone records it and they all record it multi-track, and it's all done on the highest quality. And now the robotic cameras that were so cost prohibitive, 30 years ago are now, touring devices. It's all run by computers. It can all be programmed. So, for example, I can't the Taylor Swift film was basically their touring cameras with some additional cameras and additional angles. Beyonce did this. They build a show based around all of that stuff, and then of course they enhance it with additional angles and additional cameras. But yeah, you record it now. You
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame that not more existed, right? Like that, perfectly pure copy doesn't exist from soup to nuts. That would have been gold.
Yeah, I mean, there was a disconnect in the brief, because a lot of us all felt that, video could never accurately capture both the lighting and the audio in the same way that you would see it uh, uh, in the same way that you would see,
Live.
live. And, we all had this sort of ephemeral belief that, that live space was precious and you walked away with your memory.
Mm,
And,
I suppose.
and because it could never look the way it felt, those of us who built these touring shows were bumped heads with the video production. Now it's not the case. Now it's the quality of the gear is up to speed and you can literally replicate it.
Now you did some work with George Lucas, correct?
Yes. I directed a show called Star Wars: A Musical Journey, which was an idea that came from Howard Rothman, who was the head of Lucas marketing. And it was a couple of ideas with a couple of other people as well. And the idea was to basically, tour a live scoring session. And they really didn't have much to sort of think about of what the content was. And there was a DVD that came out with a CD edition at the end. It was a DVD. It was a CD of all the music from all of the six Star Wars films. And someone in Lucas marketing decided to cut together 15 tracks in a character-based timeline of all six movies. It wasn't plot driven at all, but it was the themes that George Lucas would attach to the romantic theme, the Darth Vader theme, and it was cut together utilizing images from all six films. And I watched this thing and I said, there's your show. If we can put up the highest resolution video screen and have a full orchestra play to this, and there was narration that was done by one of the Star Wars actors, I said, then you have an opportunity to experience, the music with these great visuals. And I sold it to John Williams was very reluctant. and I sat in a room with Williams, and he said, it's a great idea, but I don't want to do it. And he was sort of reluctant, but we ended up getting the rights to be able to do it. And then I sent him a rough cut of the rehearsals, and his mind was blown. And we ended up touring with a full orchestra, playing these Star Wars themes live with Anthony Daniels, the actor who played C-3PO, doing the narration.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, it fell right at COVID, and we were touring, and then everything stopped, and we just it never got the kind of momentum that it really deserved. But it was a great show, and George came to the show in Oakland. He'd never seen it, and I'm sitting at the desk, and there's George Lucas sitting in front of me, and I'm like, oh my God, like what am I doing? And he watched the first act, and he turned around and he looked at me and he goes, Steve, that's great. I've got to get you the right Yoda footage. He says, because you're using the Yoda, the puppet, and I want the CGI. So it was like, okay, whatever you say, George. But
You're collaborating with George Lucas. I mean,
the picture of me, George Lucas, and John Williams at the Hollywood Bowl, and I'm like, come on, who is this kid? What are you kidding me?
you never picture that for yourself when you're young, right? You never imagine what life will, when you're first starting out a career, you're 20 years old, and you can't imagine one day you're going to be sitting at a table collaborating with George Lucas.
No, no, you never do. You never do.
Now, you've done comedy too, I think, right? And do you do a show with Sebastian?
I just did a show with Sebastian Maniscalco. I designed his arena tour, but my relationship with comedy and doing comedy, my first comedy special was I did Whoopi Goldberg on Broadway,
Ah,
and once again, these are these ridiculously pinch me moments. Like here I am lighting Whoopi Goldberg's Broadway show for HBO with Marty Kollner directing. I'm not a television lighting designer, but I'm brought in because my aesthetic, the director thought that I could add something to this that most of the TV lighting designers couldn't do. And from that led to George Lopez and Dane Cook. I did Dane Cook in the round. So I've had some comedy experience as a lighting designer and as a set designer. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of when you list it all and you look at it all, you're like, look at that.
look at that. Well, I mean, Sebastian's probably the hottest comedian out there right now. I
Yeah,
mean, arguably, Whoopi Goldberg's somewhat comedy royalty.
yeah.
Right. So to stretch back and say, hey, I was there for this moment is
I
you.
did the set design for Robin Williams on Broadway. I mean, that was the classic, the Robin Williams, the most classic Robin Williams routine about golf was on that Broadway show that with Robin. So yeah, I've been able to brush up against them all. So
I mean, I interviewed Donnie Most and Anson Williams, right? And they talk about when Robin Williams was on the set of Happy Days, I guess, creating the Mork character,
yeah,
Mork from Mork, and like how everybody knew in like instantly in the first moments that he transformed into the character that this was an amazing talent, something special was happening, with this guy. Was that your sense? Like the first time you saw him, that
first
there was
time I
something
saw,
special?
I'll tell you a story. The first time I saw Robin Williams, I was lighting Boz Scaggs at Harris Tahoe, and I was up in the lighting booth, and Robin Williams came up in the lighting booth because he wanted to come up there. I don't know. He might have been looking for drugs. Who the hell knows? But he came there and sat next to me and did 10 minutes of Robin Williams stuff. And I was like, would you please stop? I have to breathe. Like that was my first, I don't think he ever remembered meeting me, and I don't, I'm sure he didn't, but fast forward, like that's some amazing stuff. You get an opportunity in this business. I did an advance with Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal did a film.
Who I love.
Yeah, he did a film in Moscow and or an HBO special in Moscow, and I had just come back from the Billy Joel thing in Moscow, so I kind of knew a little bit about what was going on there. And his manager at the time said, "Why don't you come and do this advance trip?" I ended up not being able to do the actual show, but we sat in a restaurant in Moscow drinking vodka, and Billy Crystal just starts riffing. And Billy Steinberg, his manager, said, "Okay, now you watch how this works." And he did 20 minutes of like how anything could be funnier I could never imagine. Like you see these guys in their natural environment in the doing the jazz, and it's just amazing. Just amazing.
Well, I guess that's the thing, right? I mean, comedians typically are funny people. All right, isn't that how they start? Most of them
I don't know. I always find comedians being tragic people. I think there's an underlying tone of dissatisfaction in their lives, and I think there's always a dark side to every comedian. Like,
Mm,
and
it's a good point.
and I think that when they do comedy, it exercises a lot of demons in them. At least that's been my experience. Certainly with guys like Robin and guys like Billy and Crystal, and I think George Lopez was very dark in certain areas. Dane Cook, absolutely. Sebastian is just kind of a really good guy. He's just got a sense of like wonder that he's where he is, and he's
Yeah.
very talented and he's very hardworking. That's the other thing about comedians. They are incredibly hardworking people, like just as hardworking as musicians, if not more, because it's torturous up there to try and do a solid 10 minutes and I mean, torturous. It's a very hard job.
Well, I think you bring out an interesting point, right? I think that in, the audience, the consumer, I'll call us, when we watch somebody perform live, whether it be comedy or music, you think, wow, like, but they make a lot of money for this, half hour, an hour that they do, and they should just be grateful. And I mean, there's that overriding mentality. But you've never done it, right? You don't know what it takes to give you that 15 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hour performance, the amount of not only planning, rehearsal, practice, creativity, that just is all encompassing often in their lives. Those are professions that typically involve touring. So these people are, 8 months out of the year living out of a suitcase. It's not quite so glamorous, right? There's a lot. They give up a lot in their
Well,
lives.
I mean that all is in the practical execution, but at the end of the day, I think the thing that is that's most admirable about them is that they go out there without a net. Like they put themselves out there and they're basically naked. Like, to have that drive to want to make people laugh or make people applaud or make people dance and know that you have to do this, you know, and put everything out there and run the risk of people not liking you, run the risk of people, making negative comments about you and who you are and personally. Like there's the courage to do that comes with this amazing drive. Like most of the really good people that I've encountered, the really good people are just hard workers. Like they don't know any different. I mean, I think I'm the same way. I have to, I never look at it as hard work because it's all fun, but it's hours and self-doubt and depression and this sort of dark world that you have to go into to gin up these ideas. And then when you do it and somebody comes at you and doesn't like it, it hurts because of all of this catharsis you have to go through to execute this kind of stuff. It's very hard to separate yourself from it. And anything I do well, I have to take ownership of it in order to be able to do it well. So the minute I take ownership of it and you don't like it, it hurts my feelings. And you kind of have to kind of get over that.
Well, I think that's the thing about creativity, and I've said this before with some of the authors, that I've interviewed. I think one of the toughest things is to create something and then put it out into the world and go, okay, go ahead, criticize it. Like, here you go. Right? And then be on the receiving end of that. I mean, that's
Yeah,
brutal in a
yeah,
lot of ways.
yeah.
Can we talk like Reba and Tim McGraw? You did some country too.
My first country act that I did was the Judds,
Oh, sure.
way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
How that came about, I couldn't tell you. but I ended up found myself in Nashville, and I had nothing in common with anything. I was not a country fan. And then I met Wynonna and Naomi, and they were the sweetest. And this is, of course, very early on in their career. I think they'd had their first hit record. And that sort of introduced me into the Nashville world. And Reba, I had met Reba many years before I went to work for her. And my father had passed away right when we were getting ready to put the tour together, so I never got a chance to work with her then. But I remained friends with her and with Norval Blackstock, her then manager and husband. And so I got to do that. And then that led me to Blake Shelton, because Blake Shelton was managed by Norval. And I think two or three of the best of my most proud production designs are the Blake Shelton tours. I think we did some magnificent stuff, pretty early on in video displays and runways and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, so I got a chance to do all of that stuff. The funny thing about it is, Garth is a big Billy Joel fan. John Small, who did all of the filming of the early Billy Joel concert stuff, works very closely with Garth. And I always sort of wondered, like, hey, I'm over here. I'm Billy Joel's guy. Garth, you're a big fan, but I never got a chance to work with him. But
Well, still though, Tim McGraw and Reba are pretty magnificent people in the country world. They're pretty big.
yeah, yeah, they were great. Reba was fantastic. I think that show was just beautiful.
Was that before or after she was doing the TV show?
It was after the TV show.
Yeah. Still
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. It was after the TV show. It was, I got involved with her. She had a new record out, and she was relaunching her live performance career, and then that morphed into doing a residency with Reba, at and Brooks and Dunn at in Las Vegas. But
Wow.
talk about origin story, or talk about, or a track record with an artist. I did the first Mariah Carey tour. Mariah Carey had her
Mhm.
first record at Columbia. Tommy Mottola was the president of Columbia Records. Tommy was married to Mariah. I sat with Mariah in her apartment in that very first tour. And then, I evolved with Mariah, where I would do a tour, and then she'd go do work for a bunch of other people. And then I'd get called back, and then she'd go work with a bunch of other people. And then I got called back. So I sort of dipped into Mariah's world, sort of three times within her track. I haven't worked with her in a while, and I have a funny feeling it's going to come back around again, because Mariah's the gift that keeps on giving. But that's amazing to see that evolution.
Oh yeah. I mean, is there a moment that sticks out in your mind, right? This is a really hard question. I mean, because nobody who's had the kind of career that you've had and really worked at the top, right? The absolute top of that field. To narrow down and say, is there a moment? But I'm going to ask anyway. Is there a moment that sticks out in your brain where when you were in it, you were like, it doesn't get better than this moment?
That's a tough question, because
I knew it would be.
no, no, I mean, I think because there isn't just one. That's the problem. There are highlights in this 50-year career that, one doesn't supersede another. Like, um, I think, I think every single one of the ones I listed has a moment where I call them pinch me moments, where I was like, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. The process itself of building these shows, you build them in a bubble, and then once the audience comes in, they take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
And that energy, you see people responding to your work, the lighting, the video, all of that stuff. So I don't really look. A lot of them are wrapped around Billy. I think the Shea Stadium concerts are probably, right up there with the greatest nights of my life. I think that the first Elton John show was overwhelming for me, because I'd been such an Elton John fan
Sure.
my whole life. Uh, it's pretty hard the level of the audience screams that opening night on In Sync, something I'd never experienced before, that Beatlesque kind of response.
Right.
Enrique Iglesias in a bull ring in Madrid, like I thought the scaffold.
Who's got those memories? You got to write a book.
Yeah, you know, uh, I think that they're all up there. They're all up there.
Yeah, I mean, you really do have to write a book. I think you have such an eclectic, pool of memories, that I mean, an antidotes, I think with, as you said, almost every artist, there's probably an antidote that would stand out in your mind. Um, then you should put it together. You should.
Well, maybe one day. I mean, I'm at that point in my life where, there's a lot of looking back. There's a lot of looking forward too, but there's a lot of looking back. And, like I said, I've got contemporaries. I can list a handful of other designers who've had, just as an amazing run of talent, of collaborations. Leroy Bennett, from starting from Prince, going through to Beyonce, to Paul McCartney, like he's had this incredible career that he's done, from The Cure to, these amazing, beautiful visuals. And I look at myself, and I kind of look at his work, and I go, oh, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have done that. And I come from a generation, there's about four or five of us that when we started in the 70s had this journey through an industry that grew on our backs, or we grew on their backs. I don't know which is better, which
Which is right. Yeah.
is right. But so yes, I mean, I agree with you. It's a pretty eclectic run, but it also, part of me goes, yeah, I worked in them at the beginning, and then when they got good, they wanted somebody better. Like, who knows? Like, there's another way to look at it. So
Is there anybody still out there that you feel like, gee, I would love to do that person show?
Benson Boone.
Really?
Yeah, there's something about this kid that when he because he's somebody that I saw, he broke on Instagram and on TikTok, and I watched this guy go from 0 to 60 in 30 seconds, and now he's playing arenas, and I see what he's doing, and I'm sort of like, that would be fun. I think I would get along with him. I think his energy would be, he seems like a really nice guy, and that's someone that I would like to work with. I don't pine for, I don't think, the one that got away, like, gee, I really wish I did Taylor, or gee, I really wish I did Beyonce, or gee, I really wish I did The Weeknd. They're amazing shows, and they're visually stunning, but I'm not yearning. I'm glad they did what they did. Not for me. I think, that if I was to pick someone that I really wanted to work with, it would be Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like, imagining working with Frank Sinatra with these tools,
Yeah.
that would have been a dream come true for me, because I resonate with his personality, his life, and his journey. So, and I work for Billy Joel, so it's kind of the same thing, only with a piano. So it's,
I know I'm fast to running out of time, but I wanted to get to a little bit about what you're doing now, if I could squeeze that in. You're actually producing, correct? Some
yeah, I mean,
scripting.
I've got, I love telling stories. I've produced television. I produce, three mini docs, and, I did Last Play at Shea. I've done And So It Goes. I produced live television concerts, and, I'm in the narrative space. I have, this story about development that I read about all the time, development hell. It exists. I have two projects that I've been working on for over 5 or 6 years, um, that are, one's a scripted television show that's at MGM. That is it's actually based on the Billy Joel IP, but it's a completely different sort of world. And working with David Weil, the writer, who did Hunters and Invasion, and Citadel. He's written an incredible series, and so we're working on that. I think it lands at a network pretty soon. I'm doing a documentary series with the History Channel, and then I've optioned a couple of books that my friend Simon Gall's written, some historical fiction books that are one is being written by one of the West Wing alums. So hopefully that's going to come out of its cocoon stage. Um, I'm very much involved in the Billy Joel Archive project because uncovering all of this stuff, I'm reworking a lot of film pieces. I discovered that we had shot a club show that I had much more footage of in 1981 that I'm turning into a long form. So that's there. And now with And So It Goes and this sort of groundswell of appreciation of what I do, people are talking to me about other things. So I had a really great conversation with someone last night, and I know we got to go, but I want to kind of wrap up the theory about this is I've gotten to a place in my career where um, my life and my work are integrated. It isn't like I go to work and then I come back and live a life, or I live a life and then I got to leave and go back to work. So my day to day is I'm constantly thinking, I'm constantly in a creative headspace, but it's all surrounded by my day-to-day life. And I'll tell you that that is the biggest gift that most people in this business don't have. So my goals are, to be happy because when I'm happy, I'm creative. And when I'm not a tortured artist. I don't work in the darkness. I work in the light. And to be able to read scripts and give notes and have my opinions being um, listened to and respected, thinking I'm just coming from my heart and from my gut, that's a gift. So I'm not sure where any of this stuff is going to land. I don't know when it's going to get on television. I don't know when it's going to get into the theater. But the process of creativity at this point in my life, doing this stuff, is as gratifying as churning out a show. I still get a call to do a show. I get a call to design a show. Those, by certain people at certain points in their career, and I'll do all of that stuff. But it really is. I think I'm about to do, I call it Steve Cohen's second act, but I think I'm about to, embark on some things that are the sum of all of my life experiences. And hopefully I get to entertain you on a television screen with it, or a film or a movie screen. So I don't know.
I'm looking forward to that. Well, I mean, I'm going to close the podcast um, and say thank you for being here. I hope you're going to keep coming back and talking to me as new things are coming out. I mean, really, just what an honor to get this opportunity to talk to you. I encourage you, like I said, please write a book because I think you have experiences that are rattling around only in your brain that would make, very entertaining reading.
Well, I appreciate that, and I love talking to you. And then when one of these things start to become a bit more real, and maybe there's a process where I can let you in on under the hood, because as I'm doing this, I'm discovering it. So my observations might be kind of clever because they're like, I don't know, I didn't expect this to happen. So it can be fun. I think from the educational point of view that if I get to do that and people are watching and they get to learn something and they can apply that to their life and career, I mean, it's a win-win because you got to give it away to keep it.
1000%.
All
I'm
right.
I'm gonna actually let me close the podcast and say thank you everybody for watching and listening, and hopefully he'll be back.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.